Hello Nippies, welcome back to the channel, and if you're new here, hi, hello, I'm Nips, a freelance artist, and today I finally get to share what I've been working on for the last month. That's why I've been on hiatus, I'm so sorry, but yes, as you see in the title, I got to participate in creating some artwork for, if you've heard of Riot Games, then you've probably heard of a little game called Teamfight Tactics, who just had their Set 10 Remix Rumble World Championship. I'll put some clips on the screen so you guys can see how this artwork is being used. I was brought onto the team with GG Tech, an incredibly insane and amazing team of managers, producers, animators, everything, and of course, my amazing friend Wanda, who did the artwork for their last set. She's incredible. Give her a follow. I'll put her links down in the description below. So what I'll be sharing with you today is the process from start to the finished products, concept arting, conversations back and forth between the team, between Riot, and how all of these things affect all the iterations of the illustrations, how they were used, some insight behind the scenes, and of course I'll be explaining a little bit about TFT if you don't know really anything about the game. So if that's something you're interested in, stay tuned. We have quite a bit to talk about. I'm really excited, but please don't leave, because before we get into the drawing, we have to talk about today's sponsor and the last couple of months sponsor, because I've been with them for so long. I absolutely love them. Tokyo Treat! It's a monthly subscription box of Japanese snacks and treats delivered straight to your door from Japan. The box always comes carefully packaged with a booklet on top that describes every single treat included and lists important ingredients in case you're allergic or on a specific diet. It also shares relevant snippets of Japanese history and culture that are a treat, pun intended, to read. Tokyo Treat's vibe is all about trendy and fun Japanese snacks, whereas their sister box, which I didn't get for this month, Sakurako, gives you the classic cultural experience, and that's my favorite one because there's a lot of matcha, so I highly recommend you check that one out. Every time I unpack my boxes, I'm amazed at how much content and how carefully crafted everything is. The amount of stuff they include really ensures I'm trying as many things as possible, and quality is filled with love and attention. I really can't overstate it. So thank you again to Tokyo Treat, and if you'd like your own boxes, check the links down below. Okay, so Teamfight Tactics is in the genre of auto chess, which from Wikipedia is a subgenre of strategy video games that typically feature chess-like elements where players place characters or units on a grid-shaped battlefield during a preparation phase, who then fight the opposing team's characters without any further direct input from the player. The units TFT uses are characters from the universe of their sibling game, League of Legends, as you probably know. The game is divided into seasons, which they call sets, and they happen around every 4 months. Each one has like a theme and units that kind of rotate amongst each other with it, and each one of them have their own like unique traits that match the set's theme. The one that Wanda and I are working on right here is set 10, and it's called Remix Rumble. And the theme is basically centered around music genres that are also the unit's traits. And they also added the musical groups that they've created over the years, which is honestly really cool. And so for this project, Wanda and I were asked to create background illustrations for the onstage set of the World Championship. And the tournament was 3 days, and each day had its own like matching background and floor combo, which was kind of nuts because the background was LED and the floor was LED, and they both kind of like combined and joined to make this one giant illustration, which is just so incredible. I had never seen that before. And then one of the days, the last one, we needed to create an extra background illustration because it was the same one you'll see here, the top one and the one in the middle. It's the same background, but we wanted to add like a little extra flavor, which we called the wow moment, for specific moments in the tournament where there was like a checkmate sort of situation. So on top of those 7 pieces, we also needed to create an extra background for the caster desk, and this one was not in LED, it was printed separately. The team that came to us was honestly just super organized. It was so easy to work with them, and the vision that they had was very clear and very concise. They had the genres that they wanted for every single day and how they wanted them combined. And day one was country, 8-bit, arcade, and pentakill, which is one of their musical groups, if you didn't already know that. Day two was disco, emo, true damage, and true damage is the same thing as pentakill, one of their unique groups. And then day three was maestro, punk, hardstyle, and KDA. And hardstyle, KDA, same thing, one of their sets of unique groups. And the way that they wanted us to combine these genres was honestly so cool, because I was worried when I saw the list. I was like, how are we going to combine some of these genres? It doesn't feel like they mesh at all. But they asked us to create this background where it was like lands of genres, and they were competing and going into war with each other, and their lands were kind of invading each other. And that just created a cool dynamic and space for us to be very creative and liberal in the way that we incorporated these themes and genres. When I was brought into the team, the way that I was pitched this project was environments. This is not a character-driven project, and when I heard that, I freaked out, because if you know anything about my art and what I typically like to draw, environments is not anywhere near on the top 20 things that I draw or enjoy drawing. But not only was I so excited about the prospect, again, of working with Riot Games, but also TFT, which is a game that I really heavily got into not even like a year ago. And then on top of that, I got to work with Wanda, which is an artist that I have really admired for a while. So honestly, with all those factors combined, how was I supposed to say no? So if we were gonna learn, we were gonna learn now. And I think sometimes taking on these challenges, especially for an artist, is just so crucial, and putting yourself in an uncomfortable position to force yourself to learn things and to grow as an artist. Sometimes that pressure is really what you need in order to evolve as an artist. And so I decided to take this opportunity. Only good things can happen from this. There's no way that this goes wrong, right? So the first step is the concept art, and the speed paint for that has kind of like passed already. But what we decided to do was to each of us create a very quick thumbnail slash like concept sketch to kind of put on paper what each of us thought the days could look like. And then once we got to that point, we decided who was the closest to what the team and Riot wanted out of each day. And so we decided to split it 2 and 2. I took day one with the country and 8-bit, and also day two with the disco and emo. And so you'll see here on my screen, I have 3 rectangles. The top one on each of the days is mine, the middle one is Wanda's, and the bottom one is going to be the refined one after we've decided who's gonna do which one. Day 2, the disco one, got us both by surprise because we didn't really talk to each other when we created the concept sketches. And if you look at the top and the middle one, they're basically the exact same thumbnail. So we truly did share one brain cell for that one, and it had us dying. And even though we did split the work 2-2, it was really fun and interesting to still take elements from the other person's sketch that we really liked and kind of create this Frankenstein sketch of ideas. And I just absolutely loved a lot of the elements from hers, the arcade river from day 1, and also the Yasuo room on the left, which originally I was not sold on, but the more it came together, the more I was like, someone cooked here. And that brings me to my next point, because even with all of Wanda's help as far as the concept goes, I was still struggling because, like I said, I do not do backgrounds. And when I say that, what I usually mean is like, I don't really draw / render them. And so from that, you can probably guess that I also just don't design them either. So imagine all of those things combined into this, and I was just freaking out at every turn. There was a huge level of imposter syndrome, just feeling inadequate and unskilled. the pressure, especially working with someone like Wanda, who had already done this before, was incredibly skilled at creating these environments, the textures, the rendering, and everything. And I really felt like I needed to step it up more than usual. So a lot of my process for this was basically spent just redrawing things until I got it just right. During these early stages of back and forth feedback, some of the things we were asked to keep in mind while working on these were the scale. So basically to know that these are going to be on giant LED screens and to make sure that the proportions were correct as far as the casters go, because we were asked to make sure that the casters looked like they were in the environment, which basically segues into the perspective, which is basically what would enable the immersion of the casters in the environment. And also to make sure that we weren't making a perspective so intense that it basically just hurt our eyes. And this one was pretty hard for me because I'm pretty used to intense perspectives. So in my mind, I have normalized certain angles and stuff that I basically needed to redraw over and over again in order to achieve something more akin to what the team and Riot wanted. Another thing was the floor. It was imperative that the bottom of this background illustration have a seamless transition into the floor image. And that is because on stage, these two drawings were going to collide. And so because of this, a lot of the stuff in my concept sketches had stuff in the foreground, which is something that I really love to do in my illustrations. And it's just another thing that shows you how you have to adapt and how these aren't just illustrations. These have to be curated for the team and for the environment that they are going to be in. So things like the Blitz kind of just dancing and moving around in the front. And in day 3, which ended up being Wanda's, I had Jinx and Twitch kind of standing in the balcony of the opera. All of these things just had to go. I think one of the hardest things with this project was accommodating the floor. And that is because it wasn't as simple as just getting the top image and stretching it down and just continuing the drawing. The floor image had to be a square, and the top left of the square is what met with the bottom of the background image. And so we were provided with this program that you just saw on screen called Sketchfab, and that was a basically 3D model that we were allowed to input the floor image and the background image in order to give us a better idea of how these two images were going to interact in person. We were given this image on screen that was incredibly helpful because the circle kind of gave us a general idea of where the casters were going to be sitting, and each square had its in real life measurements so we could take into consideration the scale. We were also able to use Wanda's previous work from the last set because she had this one specific floor that just perfectly aligned, you'll see here, with the circle of where the casters were going to be. So with these 3 things, everything was made much more simple. Another thing was the IP, and this is really important because when you work with a company with an IP, especially something like Riot, where they have a lot of lore and characters that you have to take into consideration, the company wants to make sure that all of that is depicted properly. And so I started playing TFT about a year and a half ago, and when I get into a game pretty heavily, I love watching streams of that game as I work. And so I got pretty invested in the community. And while working on this piece specifically, especially the floor too, I wanted to include as many community memes and references as I could on these little papers. But because of that, this drawing had to go through a lot of checks to make sure that the papers were appropriate. And I did have to remove quite a bit of references that were just not in line with what the team and Riot wanted. One of those things being the little chibi Mort and having the emo crossing off his face, because if you're in the TFT community, you know that everybody just blames Mort for everything. And I just thought it was a cute way to pay him some homage and also just keep the community meme alive. But, you know, they were like, let's stay away from that. And animators were a huge thing that we had to take into consideration during this project because we had to make sure that all the layers and everything were organized to make their job easier. And normally when I'm working on my illustrations by myself, I do separate everything into layers. As the piece goes on, however, I like to just merge everything and really finish up my drawing all on one layer so I can get the drawing as cohesive as possible. However, it was so hard because I couldn't do that here. So I basically had to finalize every piece of this illustration individually. And then I had to break it up in certain chunks in order to let the animators do their thing. So for example, the papers floating around here in day 2 had to be each individually separated, and also a flat version of them had to be created so that they could warp it to their liking. We had to separate Sona's hair, her hands, the bars in the back behind her DJ setup. I created 3 different versions so that they can make the bars look like they're going up and down. Every single one of these coins. Also make sure that we had the graph separated in the river and the smoke that we're gonna add later so they can make that move. The clouds in the sky, Kale and Corky moving in the back, the flames next to the pentakill statue. And there were so many things that had to be separated, but oh my gosh, it was so worth it. The animators did such an incredible job of bringing these illustrations to life. One of the things I actually hadn't considered are the real life props that they were going to have on stage. And that's because the list of props that they were going to have meant that we couldn't put them in the drawing so that there weren't multiples, and also little things that might actually interact with the drawing on stage. Something like having a real life disco ball, so not being able to include it in the day 2, but also maybe having to include some shines as if there were a disco ball there. One of the things that I had to change because of this is in day 1, I had Yorick's guitar leaning on the door, but they said that they might have this in person, so I went ahead and I changed it to Mordekaiser's instead. One of the things that I explored in this project is photo bashing, and according to Artluck's Art Dictionary, photo bashing is a technique that consists of using multiple digital assets like pictures, textures, and 3D models to create realistic looking artwork. The only one I had really done is adding textures to my pictures. I think that's something that most digital artists are pretty familiar with. And in this drawing, I decided to replace Yorick's guitar with Mordekaiser's by importing a 3D model by Jack Art. It was so incredibly helpful. I painted over it and just integrated it into the drawing. And in that same way, I was asked for day 2 to put the Space Groove Blitzcrank armor on the side of the drawing, and because this was going to be covered by some floating papers, I decided to work smarter and not harder and import the official Riot 3D model for that, chop it up a little bit, rotate it, paint over it, and just integrate it into the drawing like I did for day 1. The model was done by Liam Nguyen, which I'm so sorry, I'm gonna anglicize your last name. I looked up a YouTube video on how to say it properly in Vietnamese, and let me tell you, it didn't go well. So I am so sorry. I also did a little bit of photo bashing with the arcade machine in the back. Normally I would do all of these things by hand, but this really taught me that it is okay to take certain shortcuts in order to meet time constraints, which we had a lot of in this project. The day 1 painting process really awoke something in me, and I want to point it out because you'll probably see it here with all the textures on the mountains and the textures I'll be adding on the grass. Because when I draw, I have around 1 to 5 set of brushes that I kind of rotate through, and they're pretty basic looking, I would say. You've got your fuzzy round brush, your hard round brush, the slanted rectangle brush, and I never really take the time to explore other brushes with textures and really just mix them to get the desired effect. And here you'll see that I messed with so many of them to really give life and details to these mountains, the grass, and this specific part, the 8-bit side, is kind of what was the breakthrough epiphany moment for me in this project. I would never really give it enough time to truly just trust the process and pull through and see what I can do, because I would get like 5 minutes into the experimenting with the brushes and be like, you know what? This is not working. This is not for me. And because this was such an important project, there was a lot of pressure on the line. I really wanted to do my best. I really forced myself to stick with it, to try every single brush, to layer every single brush, and just keep going until I got the exact effect that I wanted. And when I tell you that I cried when I got this 8-bit side more complete, because like I said earlier, I was working under the premise this entire time that I was not skilled enough to be here, that I was not worthy enough to be here, that I signed up for something that I just couldn't do. And as time went on, I didn't really mention that these feelings just got worse, because it's very easy to just create these messy kind of thumbnail ideas and concepts. But as we started to get closer to the time that, okay, you gotta render now, you gotta actually make this look finished, my panic and fight or flight was through the roof. But after this breakthrough, I finally had tangible proof that, you know what? Maybe I can actually do this. Maybe I do deserve to be here. And so the illustrations became so much more relaxed and easy that I could just trust the process and know that I can make it to the finish line. With that out of the way, we are not yet struggle-free though. One of the things that I was grappling with at the beginning of the project is, how much do I render? And I really have to keep myself in check always, because I take it too far. I do not have any concept of knowing when I should stop, because I just want to keep going and render and render and render. And it's not okay. Because in a very professional setting like this one, you will have deadlines. You will have an art style that you have to follow. And you don't have all the time in the world to spend 80,000 hours on a drawing to make something look as best as possible. So I had to find a middle ground between quality and also time efficiency. And so I typically have a super hard time kind of gauging how long something is going to take me. I don't know why I struggle so much with this. Even after like 10 years drawing, I still cannot guess how long something is going to take me. And my chat over on Twitch trolls me all the time, because you guys already know, hashtag just a sketch. I'm like, guys, it's going to be a sketch, don't worry. And then 5 hours later, we're still on the same drawing because, you know, no self-control. So there were areas in these illustrations where I basically had to re-render several times to find the right quality that I wanted. At the beginning for day 2, I actually started putting a line art for it. And midway the line art, I was like, maybe this is not the way to go. It's going to take too long. It's going to be way too detailed. It doesn't really match the art style. So I literally had to scrap the whole thing and kind of try a different angle. Because of my inability to measure time and make good estimates, what I do is I set a deadline for earlier than it's actually due. And so I leave this time towards the end as kind of this buffer time, which allows me to make last minute changes or actually finish the drawing if I haven't finished it. And so I basically, it's like setting an alarm 30 minutes before you actually have to get up. And even with that in place, I still had such a hard time like staying on time, but thankfully that's what collaborations are for. Wanda swooped in and really was such a huge help so that she could work on part of my drawing, which she did a bit of the countryside on the left, and I was able to focus a little bit on day 2 to just alleviate the pressure and just get everything done. And as the illustrations kind of came to a close, The finishing touches towards the end really focused more on how we talked about earlier, making the animator's job easier. Things like in day 2, you'll see at the top there, all the lights were separated. We had the little disco ball and the Blitz cat hands, Sona's ponytails, the music bars in the back. We had a Mumu's arm separated. We had the Yasuo room and the fan and the lights. And there were just so many cool aspects that the team did in order to bring all the motions and life into this illustration. And I already talked about this earlier, but I cannot stress enough how different it is to work in a team setting where you're drawing. You are not the final step in the ladder, that there is more after you, that the project is just bigger than you. And like I had also mentioned earlier, yes, it tests your flexibility, your cooperation, your team working and building skills and everything, but also it kind of humbles you because it's really not about you. You're kind of just a means to an end. And it really teaches you how to be a team player, which I just think is an important skill to have all around in, not just art and in work and in anything, but just to be a decent human being in general. I started playing TFT around set 9.5, like I said, so it hasn't been that long. So my knowledge of the community / game lore is not very expansive, and yet I tried my best to include as many references as I could. And one of those were the 2 swords that you see here next to Sona, which are 2 Ginsus. And listen, there's a lot of patches in TFT and they come very often, so things change very frequently. But at the time, Sona was known for building double Ginsus or Ginsus and Shojin, which is what I end up switching the Ginsus on the right to make them spray painted. So a little hint if you know about TFT and the comps and the meta. So jumping over to day 1 for a little bit, because I did get the drawing back from Wanda, and you'll see here some extra stuff added. She helped me out a bit with the sand on the left, the doors and country. She added these really cool 8-bit clouds that I swapped from black to a little bit gray to make them blend into the environment a bit more. She added the Corky and the Kale a little bit more refined. She added this like rift in the middle of the 2 skies. And I started to just refine and basically, we go back and forth between she adds a little bit of work, I refine it, she adds, I refine. And so I went in and trying to kind of blend in her style into mine, because we do have pretty different art styles. And so I took the help and the foundation that she was able to give me. She did some beautiful work on the mountains and the pentakill statue that's there on the left as well. You'll see here the bullets that I decided to add, like I said, because I couldn't add the bullet kind of coming towards us on the screen. I also added a little strap to the guitar, add a little bit more flavor to the left. It was starting to look slightly empty. I added a little pentakill button just in case we needed some more elements of pentakill and country and arcade all kind of mixing together. We had the bullet on the door as feedback to add kind of this pink aura and really inject the arcade colors a bit more on the left and, mix and match, because it was looking a little too divided. And so I decided to also add some neon kind of colors to the wanted signs on the wooden post, so that way we could have even more arcade colors. And I just really love how that turned out in the end. And what killed me was that on the signs, because obviously they're wanted, posters like the old country, westerns, are supposed to be the 8-bit characters, and under were supposed to be the rewards, which were supposed to be the 8-bit high scores from in-game. But nonetheless, still really happy with how it came out. The idea was still conveyed and got through. We were able to add the little reroll and level up icons on the boxes, which was the team's idea. So freaking clever. And we added some elements from the Ari arcade splash art, which was all the little like 8-bit mountains and the star and the coins and stuff. I really loved that part. We had Caitlin's traps sitting on the 8-bit side as well, and the animators really made those look so cute with the hollow light popping out and the cherries kind of bouncing up and down. We also had Karthus's ult all the way on the left in the back, which was very difficult to do because I could not find a conceivable way to make this look like Karthus's ult. And if you zoom in really close, you'll see a tiny, tiny, tiny little Karthus standing on a mountain that I knew no one was probably going to be able to see anyway, but just in case anyone looked far enough, there is a little Karthus there ulting. It was so fun to include little things like that in hopes that somebody might catch it, and if not, it was still really fun to add. So going back to day 2 for a little bit, we were finalizing the papers behind Amumu and the papers in general, because that's where I was going to add basically the most references, especially on the floor for this particular day. On the paper on the right, like I said earlier, we unfortunately had to remove Mortdog, but I replaced it with a crab and the Deal With It glasses because we have the Crab Rave portal, which is just super fun, super meme, super troll with the letters "It's a forest," because if you're part of the community, you know, when you're about to win, it's a forest. And so under that, I had some community members featured, which I ended up moving to the papers behind Amumu instead. We had Emily Wang, G Emily, rest in peace, K3 Digits, you know, Soju. We also had Dish Soap, which was part of the championship, really awesome. And we had Robin songs. The papers in the back were drawn in a style that was given to us on a mood board, basically like middle school paper emo doodling. And so it was really fun to kind of try and recreate that and bring that into the drawing while also including all the references. I put the little emo logo with 0 HP, you got the fast 8th, and then slowly morphing those into papers with the texture so that things can start coming to life. Then we also had to do the papers floating around on the front of the screen, and I was asked to do them separately after I had already done the drawing because the animators found it much easier to do it on a separate image, and so it was really interesting translating those into uniform separate images. And let me tell you, they came out so good in the final day. I was so excited to see it all come together. Especially the floor, because oh my gosh, the floor was all disco and the animators did such a good job of alternating the lights and just making it look like an authentic disco floor, especially also all the papers and the references that I put there. I'll probably have to show it in some other way because I do not have the speed paint for that. I unfortunately forgot to record a lot of it, and a lot of the files in this project were corrupted. I have no idea how that even happened. I'm just grateful that we had enough to make this video, period. Final products. I'm so happy. This is my favorite one. I'm very proud of all the things that I did and that I learned from this one. And oh my goodness, the animators really brought this one to life. So many fun animations, and shout out to them. And speaking of shout out to them, because the floor image is not my favorite one, but oh my gosh, did they really make this one pop to life. So this one was all them. Day 1 was so incredibly fun. The 8-bit site is my favorite. Again, neon colors. Shout out to Wanda for the help in really closing this one out. A lot of cool things that I learned on this one as well. And of course, the floor, which I just never thought I could render environments like this. So very proud of how this one came out and everything in general. All right, guys, thank you so much for watching. Let me know what you guys thought down below. Hopefully that wasn't too daunting. Like the video if you liked it, subscribe, join the Nippy family. The more, the merrier. And of course, I will have all the links down below for the team, for Wanda, and of course, for Tokyo Tree and Sakurako if you guys want to check that out. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you guys next video. Bye!